time. 17 more, that'll get more. Cygnar. Versus everybody.
Hi guys, Steve here. Got a special video today. It's a multiple battle report because I went to a tournament the weekend. It was a 50-point tournament and we were allowed to bring 2 lists, and I already posted a preamble for the tournament earlier in the week where I was deciding which lists to bring, and in the end I went for Stryker 2 list and Nemo 3 list. I was originally looking at a Stryker 2 list and a Maddox list, but someone pointed out to me the Maddox lists and the Stryker list both played very similarly, and so if someone had a counter to my particular list style, then I wouldn't have an alternative to turn to if I had the opportunity. So in the end I went for Stryker 2 with Nemo 3. My Stryker 2 list was Stryker 2 with a Squire, Rowdy and Thorn, Junior Warcaster with a Firefly, Piper of Wards, Harrison Gibbs and a maximum unit of Storm Lancers. And my Nemo 3 list was Nemo 3 with Finch and a Squire, Dynamo and a Centurion, and then Catherine Lattimore with the Junior Warcaster with a Firefly and also maximum Storm Lancers. So the Stryker 2 list is a attrition-y list with a strong assassination angle, and the Nemo 3 list is really a very strong shooting attrition list, which also has some assassination but not too much, and also had the Centurion in there to put people off charging. So I think the Nemo 3 might have been the stronger scenario denial list. And as it turned out, that we wouldn't be locked into playing any particular list, so if we wanted we could play the same list in all 3 games. I certainly felt more comfortable with Stryker 2. I feel like he's a stronger caster, even though I was playing Nemo 3 in theme and getting a free Squire out of the deal. And I was playing Stryker 2 at actually 2 points lower than the points limit for the tournament. It was a 48-point list. Still felt like the Stryker 2 list had more angles and had better elements to it. So I was pretty excited going into the tournament. I was very, very nervous when I got there originally, but luckily the first opponent was pretty nervous too, so we got over that together pretty quickly. I didn't really know what to expect, but as it turned out, it was a really nice atmosphere. Everyone was really friendly, and I think everyone had a really good time. And as it was my first tournament, I felt like I wouldn't mind too much if I didn't win any games. I had no idea of the standard of play that I was facing, if there'd be any power gamers, or if everyone was as inexperienced as I am. So I felt like if I won 1 game out of the 3, I'd be pretty happy with that. So as I said, the first opponent was a Cygnar player, and before he even decided which of his lists he was going to play, I'd already decided to play Stryker 2. Nemo 3 has a lot of lightning shooting in the list, and if I'm up against Cygnar, then chances are I'm going to be up against someone who has a lot of lightning immunity, and Stryker 2's list didn't depend as much on lightning damage type, so yeah, I went for Stryker 2. My opponent decided to go for Stryker 1. His list was Stryker 1 with a Stormclad and a Centurion. Oh, this is in the Storm Division theme, by the way. So yeah, Stryker 1 with a Stormclad and a Centurion, Journeyman Warcaster with a Cyclone, and then he had Strange Ways and Lattimore, and a full unit of Storm Lancers. So it was nice to see a lot of models that I was already familiar with, and I think that helps a lot. Especially in the opening game, it made me relax a little bit. I felt a lot more comfortable feeling that I knew what his list could do. Never played Stryker 1 before, I've never used Stryker 1 before either, but I knew that his feat was pretty strong armour buff, and looking at his card, he's got no other special rules and he's got a pretty simple list of spells. So the scenario was the pit. I won the roll-off and I decided to go second. Because I felt like if scenario was going to come into it at all, then it'd be easier for me to clear out the circle zone and get started scoring with the flag if possible. And I deployed with that in mind. So with the forest in the centre of the zone, that would actually make it pretty difficult to clear it out when it came turn to start scoring. But anyways, I set up the Storm Lancers ready to get the best charge possible through the visible part of the zone, and I set up Stryker 2 ready to score the flag or the zone, depending on what was required, and then everyone else was just grouped around according to the activation that I was expecting. So unfortunately here I only remembered to photograph each round after both of us had finished our turns, so you have to bear with me. I'll give you the general gist of the game. And in the deployment, you'll notice that his deployment was pretty spread out, and my deployment was grouped up very tight. And I kind of feel that spread out deployment is something that you move away from the more games you play, because it's quite important. Most of the battles are centered in the middle of the board, and it's quite important that all of your models get access to that as quickly as possible. It usually means deploying very close, wedged up together in the center of the board, and then you get used to playing your first turn, unpacking your list and getting into position. So as you can see, we both moved up. I did it according to my plan as before. Got Arcane Shield up on the Storm Lancers, which was my general plan for this list anyway, and I also managed to get Rebuke up on his Storm Lancers, which is pretty handy. A very nice Rebuke's a really nice way of neutering your enemy's cavalry. And in my first turn I was a little bit I held back a little bit because I knew his feet would be coming probably on the turn before he was expecting my Alpha Strike, so I thought there was no point in being too aggressive because he would just be very difficult for me to do any damage to him probably on the turn that he feated. And in the end he feated on, I believe, turn 2, and yes, there was pretty low casualties on both sides. His Centurion's up in the zone, obviously can't be charged and can't be slammed out of the way, so it's pretty much unmovable, and that Centurion on his own pretty much shut down my scenario play. I managed to score a point on the second round with Stryker on his flag because I was playing second turn, and he didn't manage to get his version of Stryker in close enough to his flag to score. But his Storm Lancers are looking pretty threatening and have open channels to Stryker 2. That square template that Stryker 2 sitting next to turned out to be a trench. I actually thought it was a house, an obstruction, so I was feeling pretty good about the situation. But luckily I was up keeping Rebuke on his Storm Lancers, which prevented him from charging Stryker 2. But maybe if I'd realised that, I might have been a bit more careful. But it also meant that I felt like I couldn't directly charge the Storm Lancers and feet, because I felt like I didn't have line of sight. In actual fact I did, and I could have done that. So already making some mistakes, but luckily didn't cause too many problems. So moving on to the next turn, the next round rather. So both of us have had another turn here, and you can see there's still pretty quite a lot of models on the board. I've taken out one of his Storm Lancers. His Stormclad is lining up to take out Stryker 2. His Centurion is still causing me many problems in the zone and refusing to go down. I believe I disrupted him, but I was already in the fray, as it were, so not being able to charge him at that point wasn't much of an issue. And one of my Storm Lancers is preventing his Striker from scoring any points. At this point my Striker's moved away from his zone because I feel like I need to use his Overload ability to take out his Storm Lancers, especially on feet turn. But I rolled really pretty badly for his Overload ability, and so yeah, between him and Rowdy they were only able to take out one of the Storm Lancers. Storm Lancers at armour, whatever it was, 25 or something. Yeah, they're very difficult to take out. So yeah, he had Arcane Shield up. He's got his Caster and the Junior Warcaster both capable of putting up Arcane Shield. So his list really is about scenario denial and absorbing the Alpha Strike. And it did it really well. But as you can see in the next photo, his version of Stryker moved up to try and take out my Storm Lance that was preventing him from scoring his flag. That Storm Lance just steadfastly refused to die. The attrition game has continued. His Stormclad made an attempt at charging my Warcaster, but countercharge and retaliatory strike on Rowdy is pretty special, so I was able to countercharge into the way to prevent him from getting to Stryker 2, and then the retaliatory strike ended up knocking down the Stormclad, which took him out of the game, and on my turn I ended up having a vector straight line to be able to take out his Warcaster, to take out Stryker 1 with Stryker 2. Stryker 2's assassination threat range is pretty good, it's about 17 inches. It's non-linear, and because I've got Piper in the list, I've got Pathfinder built in, so forests cause much fewer problems. So yeah, I got lucky, he wasn't paying attention to my assassination vector, and I moved in, overloaded for a second time thanks to Gibbs, and managed to take him out. So I managed to win my first game, so I was pretty chuffed with that. I felt like I'd already achieved my goal for the tournament of getting one game under my belt. So anything else was just gravy, so I was pretty happy with that. So it was quite interesting playing in the mirror matchup up against Cygnar, but I feel like my Stryker 2 list is pretty strong and can cope with it. So moving on to the second game. So next up I got paired up against Legion, and I haven't got any experience against Legion up until now. In fact, I haven't played against Hordes at all until now. So So I didn't really know what I was getting into. I knew Legion had got a reputation about being a glass cannon faction, so they do a lot of really good shooting, but they're pretty easy to kill themselves. So I realised I probably wouldn't win in a shootout with using Nemo 3, and it would be better to get into close combat against Legion pretty quickly as possible. And I had some pretty good shooting protection in the Stryker 2 list. The plan is to put up a wall of Storm Lancers and then hide the rest of the list behind, get Arcane Shield up on the Storm Lancers, put Deceleration up on Stryker, and put Concealment up using Piper on the Storm Lancers. So they buff it Defense 15 and Armor 22 against shooting. So that would hopefully help me weather the first turn of incoming fire before I managed to get into close combat. So yeah, I went with Stryker 2. So the Legion list was Rias, a Sigil of Everblight, and in her battle group there's a Carnivian, a Rake, a Naga Night Lurker, and a Seraph. He's got 2 Forsaken Solos, 2 Strider Deathstalkers, and a unit of Strider Scouts with the Strider Scout Officer and Musician. And here's the setup. So the Strider Scouts and the Musician have advanced deployment. He chose the side with the most cover. I think Legion they've got a lot of Pathfinder and they can see through forests and things like that, so I think their forests are pretty friendly for them. And I wasn't too disappointed about that because it left me a very open board, which allowed me a lot of manoeuvring space on my side of the board. And I ended up going first again. The scenario was Incursion, and to me, the way that the board was set up, it seemed to be a bit of a dead scenario. I didn't really feel like I was going to win by scenario, scoring any points. So I felt like an aggressive game plan was the way to go. Also, I didn't have, as I said, I didn't have any experience against Legion, so pretty much all the units, solos, and warbeasts were all a bit of a mystery to me. And I just had to go with my general feeling that I got from watching other battle reports about how Legion played. And I certainly didn't have any idea about the Warcaster that I was up against, although my opponent was kind enough to explain all the special rules. So as I said, I went first, and here's my first turn. So yes, a very aggressive first turn for me, and as I explained before, I got my army up behind the wall of Storm Lancers, buffed up wall of Storm Lancers, and expected some pretty heavy incoming fire, which is what happened. Although I was pretty lucky with most of the shots that came in. The Storm Lance on the far right lost a couple of boxes and was on fire, so I didn't expect him to last very long. But apart from that, my opponent is obviously going for scenario, heading towards the left and right flags there, and looking to occupy the middle flag as well. I don't think he had too much experience against Cygnar, and definitely not against Storm Lancers, so he didn't realise how dangerous they can be and how good they are. So what it actually looks like is his army's pretty nicely set up for me to get a nice alpha strike. So that's exactly what I did. Storm Lancers moved in, spread out very widely. In fact, the Storm Lance on the far right was actually out of formation. In the end, it didn't matter because he already killed the 2 Deathstalkers, managed to take out the Carnivian with a couple of Storm Lancers, and managed to tie up the Rake on the left-hand side with Thorn. Moved Stryker into the trench, just in case there was any nasty shooting that was going to happen on his reaction, and then I feated as well and did a lot of extra movement and some extra attacks. And as you can see, I was feeling pretty good at this point. I'd taken out very large chunks of his army and was in a pretty good position as far as the attrition was concerned, and actually not in a too bad position as far as the scenario was concerned. I was preventing him scoring any points, and some pretty dangerous, got 3 Storm Lancers and Rowdy all within a dangerous area of his Warcaster. Then finally the last thing I did was move my Journeyman Warcaster, because the Firefly would have been out of its control range, so I moved up the Journeyman Warcaster just to where you can see it is now, and just so on the next turn I'd be able to get my power up and activate the Firefly as usual. And this turned out to be the big fatal mistake of the game, because the thing about Rias is that she can charge quite a long way, and then the person that she's charged, she can then move herself to be anywhere in base-to-base contact with her victim, and the Journeyman Warcaster is in the perfect position to allow Rias to jump over and get Stryker in her 2-inch reach range, and without any problem at all she was able to assassinate Stryker. So it was a bit of a gotcha moment. I was very disappointed because I really felt like I had the game tied up already, had it in the bag, and just due to random placement of the Genuine Warcaster, I lost the game suddenly. But that's the way the cookie crumbles, that's the way it works out sometimes. My opponent played very well, managed to spot the mistake that I'd made, and took the opportunity, which is exactly what I would have done as well. So that was a really fun game, very dramatic, and I'm 1 for 1. 1 loss and 1 victory in the tournament. So still feeling pretty good, and it was time to move on to the third round. So in the third round I drew Cygnar. There was a lot of Cygnar players in the tournament, so I was surprised that I hadn't already come up against Cygnar on the day. But yep, this was my first time against Cygnar in the tournament. I've got 2 Cygnar players in our little group, Leon and Tees. So I had a little bit of experience up against Cygnar, knew what to expect, and my opponent had only 1 list available for the tournament. So I was able to make my choice of Warcaster based on his list, which looked like this. He played Butcher 1, and in Butcher 1's battle group there was 2 Kodiaks and a Marauder. He also brought 2 minimum units of battle mechanics, 1 maximum unit of Man-of-War Shock Troopers, 1 minimum unit of Man-of-War Bombardiers, and 1 Man-of-War Kovnik. And I think that's it. That only works out at 45 points, but I believe that's the whole list. And we were playing Recon, and because I was going to be up against such a lot of boxes and so much armour, I went for Stryker 2 again. I felt like if it came down to it, then again he's got his assassination vector, but also he has the ability to take out Cygnar heavies. Also, I'd already played 2 games with Stryker 2, so I felt like I was a lot more comfortable with the list. It was getting towards the end of the day and I was pretty exhausted at this point. So yeah, I just went for Stryker 2 again. So Nemo 3 didn't get played in the end, but I was pretty happy with Stryker 2, so felt like it was the right thing to do. This time I lost a roll-off, but the Cygnar player really felt like he needed the first turn, get further up the board, so I got the second turn, and I managed to take the side that I took, which you can see here. And the reason I took this side is because it meant that the Cygnar player, to get into the zone, would have to funnel very closely between the house and his objective and the forest, and I felt like I could set myself up for a pretty decent alpha strike against whatever happened to poke its way through that gap. So my setup is pretty obvious. The Storm Lancers are set up ready to move up on the left, get the best angle at whatever comes through that gap. I'm planning on moving Stryker up into the zone with a bit of protection from the forest that's on the zone. So my biggest challenge I think here was really just getting as many models, because I've got so many large base models, getting as many models against his models that poke through that gap. So here's his first turn and my first turn in one photo. You can see he pretty much just ran everyone up. His shooty Man-of-Wars are just up on the hill there, although I think they're not going to be doing very much because I'm not going to be going anywhere near their shooting range. And all of the Man-of-War, other Man-of-Wars and all of the Warjacks are all making their way up to the zone. And at this point I can see that there's no way he's going to fit all of them through the gap at the same time, so that feels pretty good to me. And I did just as I explained. I got my Storm Lancers ready for a big old alpha strike through the gap onto whatever he moves up on his next turn. Got Thorn and the Firefly ready to move in, get positive charge up on the Thorn to help crack that Cygnar armour. Got Rowdy also an angle where he would be able to charge the other end of the zone if necessary on his turn. And Stryker's there too, also ready to charge into the zone and possibly do some damage. So here's what the board looked like after the second round was finished. Obviously no one's going to be scoring this turn. That zone is permanently wedged up, I believe. He managed to move a Kodiak quite far up into the zone. And what you can't see very well from this picture is that Stryker 2 actually had an assassination angle on Butcher, and I probably could have ended the game then and there with Butcher being the only model to have died, but I got so obsessed with working out the best way to do it that I forgot to activate Rupert Piper Ord first and put Pathfinder and Stryker to get him through the forest that was between Stryker and the Butcher, and that messed up my entire plan, unfortunately. So a perfectly good assassination victory was pretty much ruined just because of an activation order error, which is something I need to be extremely careful about in the future because it makes such a huge difference. So I went from more or less having the game wrapped up to having a big problem with attrition. But luckily, Stryker still had enough to take out one of the Kodiaks that had moved up into the zone, and still had enough focus to move back to relative safety on the edge of the zone, still towing in though. Then the Storm Lancers moved in, managed to do some damage to some of the men of war, and one of the big problems that he had is that the gap between his objective and the house, the obstruction, was actually too small for a heavy to move through. So his one Kodiak that was on the right hand side was able to move into the zone and then got chopped down by Stryker. And unfortunately for him, his other two heavies had to circle round just to be able to get an angle to move into the zone on the next turn. Then his man-of-war bombardiers are making their way around the forest, and I deliberately positioned Rowdy in a spot where they would have to move to be able to shoot him, and hopefully I would be able to countercharge them when they poke their head around the forest. So it's really an attrition game at this point, and I believe my opponent has too many boxes for me to easily manage to win. And those man of wars are really tough. He's got them, I believe he's got iron flesh on them, and also he's got them in base to base, and he keeps using shield wall order, so they're up at armor 23. So it's really taking me a whole turn to kill each one of them. So looking at the table on the next turn, so this time I managed to remember to photograph the turn rather than the whole round. And as you can see, my plan with Rowdy on the right worked out. One of his bombardiers finished within 6 inches of him, and he was able to charge up and take out the bombardier. And then he had a line angle towards Butcher, so my opponent moved one of his Kodiaks in between to stop the assassination on the potential assassination on the next turn. And Butcher also managed to defeat this turn, although he got pretty unlucky with his attacks against Thorn, and Thorn was able to dodge it out of the way and avoid any further attacks. Did take down one of my Storm Lancers though, and I believe did some damage to one of the others. But because the Storm Lancers repositioned on the previous turn, he wasn't able to get to the other two standing at the back there. Then on my turn, I did another counter charge with the Storm Lancers. Only got a charge bonus on one of them though. Tried to take out some more man of war. Rowdy just went ahead and took the free strike from the bombardier and moved on to attack the Kodiak, and he managed to get a critical hit on the Kodiak, knocked him down. The Journeyman Warcaster and Gibbs were able to take out the other two men of war bombardiers, which was really great. Not before Gibbs healed Stryker back up to his full health. Thorn really earned his money in this game, really earned his points in this game. He poked the Marauder with his Disruption Spear, which my opponent found very frustrating, wasn't allowed to allocate him any focus, more or less for the rest of the game. Another one or two of the Man of War went down in the middle. So thanks to Rowdy and Thorn, the attrition is going much better than I originally expected. I mean, Thorn is really, really good against heavies because of his Disruption Spear and his dodge ability. If they miss him, he can dodge away, and if they hit him, they get disrupted or lose Cortex, or if he hits them, they get disrupted, which makes him harder to hit, which makes him able to dodge away. So my opponent's looking out to close out the game on scenario now by scoring the flag with Butcher on the right hand side. So he decides to try and take down Rowdy. So he charges in and does some damage, and lo and behold, Rowdy's retaliatory strike knocks down Butcher. I got really lucky there, so Butcher's knocked down, he can't complete his activation, can't do any more spells, and Stryker 2 has an angle for assassination on the Butcher, so all Rowdy has to do is move out of the way, knock some of the boxes off the Butcher, and then Stryker 2 does a second overload, charges in, and slices that Butcher clean in half. So I got a second bite of the cherry in this game after my messing up big time at the beginning of the game, missing out on the obvious assassination angle. I was then able to, just from luck and some bad rolls from my opponent, good rolls from me, I was able to try the assassination a second time, and the second time it worked out. So yeah, I managed to get 2 out of the 3 games that I played I won, so I was really, really happy with that result. Very, very frustrated about the game I lost because I felt like I was going to win it and then got assassinated. But seeing as I assassinated my other 2 opponents, I can't really complain about that as a way of winning. It was quite interesting playing only 50 points about how much the assassination vectors came into it, because there's less of an army between you and your opponent's Warcaster. They can assassinate you much easier and you can assassinate them much easier. and scenario didn't really come into it. Although I think that was more a symptom of the styles of lists that I was up against, rather than it not being possible to win on scenario. Although scenario seems less likely at a lower points level. So at the end of the day, I was pretty exhausted. 3 games in a day, it was crazy. I felt like I'd done a 12-hour day at work, but I had so much fun. It was really good. I'm definitely going to play in more tournaments in the future, and I think I'm going to be playing more Stryker 2 in the very near future as well. The list was great, and I really feel like Stormlancers are an excellent unit, although it's obviously feels like it's a little bit OP, but they do need a lot of support to get the best out of them. But when you do get good stuff out of them, they feel pretty amazing. Rowdy was just fantastic, loads of counter charges, loads of retaliatory strikes all the time. Thorn was fantastic throughout the whole tournament, kept on getting my money's worth out of him. Gibbs with Stryker 2 is great. It's like, as I've said before, it's like having a second feet, being able to heal back up after doing an overload. Piper was great. Pathfinder I believe I used in every game. It was handy having the Squire to give Stryker the extra focus. One time it actually stopped him getting damaged because of being able to reduce the using the power field to reduce the damage on an assassination attempt, although it didn't actually stop the assassination in the end. So I really feel like every part of the list played a part. The Arcane Shield on the Genuine Warcaster was worth it. The weakest link I feel was the Firefly, but really I think that was only because I didn't get the opportunity to do much shooting damage with the Stormlancers. So possibly in a large list, the Firefly could stay. Possibly, I would possibly look at swapping him out, possibly for a Charger, to try and get those a bit of extra shooting out of it. But I will certainly be slightly modifying my standard 75-point Stryker 2 list and playing it a lot to try and really learn it and really get the best out of it. So anyway, I had a really nice time at the tournament, and thanks for listening to my long and boring ramblings about the ins and outs of it. I had a really nice time. You can look forward to some more tournament reports in the future. Anyway, I'll see you on the next Bat Rep. Cheers.